The morning sun barely touched the marble floors of St. Helena's Hospital when Dr. Claire Monroe walked in, her heels clicking sharply through the quiet corridor. She was young, only 34, and already the head of neurology. Her white coat was crisp, her expression colder than the tiles she walked on. The nurses said she had no time for feelings. Others whispered she had too many, but had buried them under layers of logic and rules. That morning, a complaint had reached her desk. A patient's family reported that the hospital janitor, Eli Thompson, a man in his late 50s who had been sweeping those floors for 20 years, had interfered in medical affairs. Apparently, he'd tried to stop a patient's transfer, insisting that something didn't feel right. Claire sighed. Another case of someone trying to play doctor. By noon, she'd already made up her mind. "We can't have janitors second-guessing medical decisions," she told HR. He crossed the line. Eli was quiet as always when they called him into her office. His hands were rough, scarred from decades of mopping, scrubbing, fixing. His uniform bore the faded logo of St. Helena's. He looked more like someone's grandfather than a troublemaker. "Mr. Thompson," Claire began, her voice clipped. "We received reports you interfered with patient transport yesterday. Can you explain?" Eli looked at her with kind, weary eyes. "Ma'am, I wasn't interfering. I was just trying to help." "How?" she asked, arms folded. "There was a boy, Nathan, room 214. They were taking him for surgery, but I'd seen him around for weeks, and yesterday he didn't look right. Pale, breathing shallow. I told the nurse maybe they should check his charts again. I just had a feeling something was off." Claire's patience thinned. "A feeling? Mr. Thompson, medical procedures aren't based on feelings. You're not a doctor." "I know," Eli said softly, "but I've cleaned this hospital long enough to see things people miss. Sometimes the floor tells you more than the chart." "The floor?" She frowned. He gave a half smile. "Blood spots that don't match the diagnosis, vomit that shouldn't be there, footprints that tell a story. You notice things when you're the one who cleans up after everyone else." She wanted to roll her eyes, but something in his tone, gentle, unassuming, made her pause. Still, she had rules to uphold. "Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid I have to let you go. You're an excellent janitor, but interfering with medical processes is unacceptable. This is final." He nodded slowly, stood up, and said quietly, "I understand, ma'am. I only hope the boy's all right." Later that day, Claire received an emergency page. "Nathan, room 214, critical." Her stomach twisted. She rushed to the ICU where chaos met her. Nurses scrambling, alarms screaming. Nathan, the boy Eli had mentioned, lay pale and still. His heart monitor flatlined for 2 agonizing seconds before the resuscitation team revived him. They'd nearly lost him. "Cause?" Claire demanded. "Severe allergic reaction to anesthesia," one doctor reported breathlessly. "It wasn't noted in his file." "How could that happen?" she asked. The doctor grimaced. His old records weren't merged with the new ones. Someone missed it. For the first time that day, Claire's composure cracked. The janitor's words echoed in her mind. "I had a feeling something was off." She sat alone in the on-call room that night, staring at the floor Eli had once polished until it shone. The floor tells you more than the chart. What had he meant? She didn't know yet, but she would. Life in a hospital rarely paused for guilt. New patients arrived, old ones healed or didn't. But Claire couldn't shake Eli from her thoughts. She'd see his empty mop closet every morning and feel a strange, hollow ache. He'd been invisible for years, until he wasn't. Then one night, something happened that changed everything. A nurse, Maria, fainted in the corridor. It was late, the halls were quiet. Claire rushed to help. Maria came to quickly but complained of dizziness and blurred vision. They thought it was exhaustion, until Maria's left arm went limp. "Get her to MRI," Claire ordered. Minutes later, the scan results came in, and what the machine revealed made Claire's blood run cold. There, glowing against the dark background, was a cluster of cells pressing against Maria's optic nerve. A tumor, small but dangerously placed. But something was strange. It looked like it had been growing for years, yet Maria had no symptoms until now. Claire reviewed the scans again and again, trying to make sense of it. Then she remembered something Eli had once said. the day she'd seen him wiping down MRI room windows. Sometimes the machine hums differently when something's not right, like it's whispering before anyone listens. She'd laughed at the time, but now as she stared at the scan, she noticed something, an error code in the metadata. The machine had logged intermittent magnetic irregularities over the past week. It wasn't just Maria, it might be affecting all scans. Her breath caught. If the MRI was malfunctioning, how many diagnoses were wrong? She ordered immediate maintenance, and sure enough, the engineer found a subtle calibration fault. The system had been misreading intensity gradients, possibly for weeks. Eli had been right again. He'd once mentioned the weird buzz of the MRI when he mopped the room. Her heart sank. By dawn, Claire couldn't hold it in any longer. She drove to the address on Eli's old employment file. It was a small house at the edge of town, paint peeling, garden overgrown, but neat in its own way. When Eli opened the door, his surprise was genuine. "Dr. Monroe," he said, blinking in disbelief. "This is a first." "I needed to talk to you," she said. He gestured her inside. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. Photos of children and grandchildren lined the mantel. She sat across from him, clutching a folder of MRI reports. "You were right," she said quietly, "about the boy. And the MRI. You were right about everything." Eli smiled faintly. "You don't have to say that, ma'am." "No, I do." Her voice trembled. "Because people could have died." "I fired you for caring too much." He sipped his coffee. "Caring doesn't always fit in the rule book, doctor. But it's what keeps a place human." Claire looked around the modest room. "You could have been angry." "I was," he admitted. "But anger's heavy. I'd rather carry a mop." For the first time, she smiled. Then her eyes landed on a stack of hospital journals on his table. Neurology research, surgical case studies. "You read these?" He chuckled. "I never went to college, but I like learning. When you mop up after surgeons long enough, you start wondering what's really happening beyond the doors." Something in her broke open then, a mix of admiration and regret. "You're remarkable, Eli." He shrugged. "Just a janitor who listens." The next day, Claire called a hospital board meeting. The administrators were skeptical when she proposed rehiring Eli, not as a janitor, but as a patient environment liaison, a role she invented on the spot. "He has no medical degree," one board member protested. "He doesn't need one," she said. "He sees what we don't. He notices patterns, behaviors, the small details that slip past our charts. We've been blind to the human part of healing." The motion passed, barely. When Eli returned to the hospital, the staff whispered again, but this time in awe. His mop had been replaced by a clipboard and a badge, but he still moved with the same quiet grace, pausing to talk to patients, to observe. And slowly, things began to change. It started small. Eli noticed that patients in one ward recovered slower than others. He mentioned it casually to Claire. Something about the air vents humming louder there. Maintenance checked, and they found a mold issue in the ducts that had gone undetected. Next, he pointed out that some elderly patients avoided one nurse, not because of her care, but because she wore a perfume that reminded them of antiseptic used during wartime. When she switched scents, anxiety levels dropped. Data confirmed it. Eli's insights became hospital legend. Doctors started consulting him before major cases, not for medical advice, but for human perspective. He'd sit with families, translate their fear into questions doctors could answer. Patients called him the heart of St. Helena's. And Claire, she learned to listen, not just with her brain, but with something deeper. She found herself walking slower through the halls, greeting people by name, noticing the tiny invisible threads that tied everyone together. One quiet evening, months later, Claire found Eli sitting by the MRI room, gazing through the glass. The machine hummed steadily again, perfectly calibrated. "I still think about that day," she said. He smiled. "The day you fired me?" "Yes," she admitted. "I thought I was protecting the system." "But you were protecting people." He didn't reply, just looked at the machine. "Funny thing about MR is," he said softly, "they show what's hidden inside, but only if they're working right. Sometimes people are the same way. They need recalibrating before they can see what's real." Her throat tightened. You're talking about me. I'm talking about all of us, he said, standing. We all get misaligned sometimes. As they stood there, the low hum of the MRI filled the room, rhythmic and alive. Claire realized it wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder that beneath data and rules, medicine was still about humanity, intuition, and compassion. A year later, St. Helena's received national recognition for its patient empathy integration program, founded by Dr. Claire Monroe and inspired by Eli Thompson. When the award ceremony came, she insisted he attend as co-founder. He wore his old uniform jacket beneath a new suit for luck. Before going on stage, she handed him an envelope. I found this in your old locker, she said. Thought you should see it. Eli opened it. Inside was a letter dated 10 years ago, application for a custodial position. But at the bottom, in faint pencil, were words she'd never noticed before. I just want to work somewhere that heals people. He looked up, eyes wet. Guess it finally came true. She smiled through her own tears. You healed more than you know. Years later, new interns would arrive at St. Helena's, nervous and eager, and someone would always tell them the story of the janitor and the doctor. They'd point to a plaque near the MRI suite that read, Healing isn't just science. It's also listening. Eli Thompson, Hospital Care Liaison, 1957 to 2021. And sometimes when Claire walked those halls, older now, slower, she could almost hear his voice echoing through the corridors. The floor tells you more than the chart. And she'd smile, knowing that in the quiet, in the overlooked spaces, that's where healing truly began.